We're in the middle of a 3-day storm, and I just had a feeling that one of the goats was gonna have babies. All right, we need to probably do something so they can get a little bit warm.
Look at me in it. Look at how little they are.
Yeah, and there's another one in here.
Huge.
No, she's actually smaller than, there's 2 of them. Where's your babies at, Cream Puff? This is the 2,400 gallon bobtail propane tank that I drove out to Oklahoma a couple of weeks ago and brought back. And now I'm going to remove anything and everything that doesn't need to be on it, including the skirts that are welded to the tank. And then I'm going to go through the process of getting it pressure tested and getting it ready for propane. And then as soon as the snow melts, we're going to find a new spot for the propane tank that more than likely is going to be about 70% underground, like the water tank shed that I built over summer. But before I can worry about where I'm going to put it on our property and how I'm going to tie it into my existing gas system, the first thing that I've got to do is safely cut these skirts off without blowing up. And while I'm using that torch, I've got to be very careful not to damage the tank beyond repair. This bobtail propane tank was in use up until just a few years ago, so it really shouldn't take a whole lot to get this tank certified and in use here at our place. But this tank has to be pressure tested to 250 psi, so all of the caps and plugs that I use have to meet those specs. By the way, the tank was partially disconnected as it sat there in Oklahoma, so even as I'm taking it apart, I smell no residual propane, but I'm still going to be very careful. The only cheater I could find was a piece of ABS pipe, and that didn't do a whole lot for me, as you can see. That pipe is not currently tied into anything. I've got caps over everything that I want to get caps over. And this thing down here is what I'm trying to get to and get to safely. And what I think I'm going to do is just try and really carefully lift this propane tank over on its back on that snowbank right there. I think I can safely do that where it wouldn't do any damage to the propane tank or the the pump, I guess. So I really don't want to get down underneath that tank and lay on my back and try and get some of them big bolts loose. So we'll see if we can flip this thing over safely, and that'll give me way more ease of access. And hopefully I'm going to try and get this pump removed. So. So it's actually resting there in the snow, and the skid steer is just kind of there in case it does shift and come back. I thought about pushing it over the rest of the way, but I don't think it's going anywhere. So I'm going to try and see how hard it's going to be to get these bolts to break loose, and that's going to tell me if I need to go ahead and flip it over the rest of the way. I ordered the blind flange to block off the pump, but the parts aren't here just yet. And when they get here, naturally we'll get it installed. One of the concerns that I do have is what does the inside of this tank look like? And as soon as I get that pump off, I'm going to put my camera up in there and see what it looks like. Having a 2,400 gallon bobtail propane tank here at our place is no different than having an extra water tank up on the hill. And after going through the winter that we just went through, I will feel good when I know this tank is in place and ready to be used. But the idea behind the bobtail tank is I could sell my other 1,000 gallon propane tank and that would pay for this tank. But I may keep the old tank as well. There is no rust whatsoever in this bobtail propane tank. Let's go, I'll take you in.
Thinking places where you spend your time. Ain't no place I'd rather go. You're a funny little critter and I love you so, man. I wanna take a ride and the wheelbarrow in your mind. I come and sit down with me in a rocking chair. Coffee pot is nice and hot. We can sit in our underwear. Tell me about the dreams you had last week, swimming all around with the fish in the sea. Come sit down with me in a rocking chair. For a couple of days or even just an afternoon. They'll be looking up and we'll be looking down. We can wave to the people in my hometown now. Come on, baby, let's fly up to the moon. Well, I wanna take a ride in the wheelbarrow in your mind. Take me all around to the thinking places where you spend your time. Ain't no place I'd rather go. You're a funny little critter and I love you so, man. Take a ride in the wheelbarrow in your mind. Yeah, I wanna take a ride in the wheelbarrow in your mind.
Okay, so while this one was filling, I went ahead and hooked the other tank up. Okay, then from the app, see that? Start generator now, start now, okay. Listen, is the generator starting? Yep, there it goes. I'll set my timer for every bit of about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then I just check the percentage again. Okay, so at this moment we are at 51%. And I'll check it in a couple of hours and see what the batteries are at. And I'm hoping this is the last time we have to charge our batteries this way. Mother Nature gave us another friendly reminder this winter of what's possible living where we live. I lost track a long time ago, but it has to be well over a 200-inch year, which has to be about double what we usually get. I once heard a story about a rancher friend of mine that caught his pastures on fire after running water through a propane tank that he would later make into a barbecue grill with his torch. When I first got into the plumbing trade and I was training to be a plumber, I learned about a man that worked for the same company that I worked for that attempted to weld a tab on a forklift propane tank when the tank still had propane in it. It did not end well for him, and unfortunately, he lived through it. But he's missing some appendages because of the accident. Come here, dogs. Get back away. That's hot. Come here, Ruby. Lily. So after removing what I removed from the tank, I made sure and capped everything off, just so I don't have to worry about anything. But I'm cutting about an inch away from the tank as I remove these skirts. Once I get everything removed and properly capped off, I'm going to put this thing on some skids of some kind. So when I need to move it, I can move it with the skid steer without doing any damage to the tank. But once it warms up, I'm going to use some industrial grade white oil-based paint to paint the propane tank with before I set it in place. And then using the big heavy concrete blocks that I picked up last year, I'm going to build a retaining wall around the propane tank and probably the diesel tank as well. After spending a day using my old torch setup with my standard tip size, I decided to go to town and actually get a bigger tip that'll help me cut a little bit faster. But most of the steel on the skirt is not that thick. And again, I'm trying to stay about an inch away from the tank. Once the skirts are removed and I have more room, I'll go back to my smaller tip on my torch and I'll cut it back a little bit closer to the tank. A standard 1,000-gallon propane tank, completely empty, weighs about 1,500 pounds. Now, I learned after hauling it back from Oklahoma that this tank weighs just a little bit over 4,000 pounds. But I've got to think I've cut close to 1,000 pounds off by removing the skirts. Because this tank is a DOT spec tank, the steel is a little bit thicker. But after I get the steel all cut back to where I want it, I'll use my angle grinder and very carefully knock any slag off of what's left, but I will not touch the tank with my angle grinder. On the next video about the bobtail propane tank, it will be all about the caps required to meet pressure specs, as well as the valves that will be needed to fill it and use it.